welcome to tonight. Thank you for coming. The Mending Broken benefit started out as a book, which is over there, and I was going to do a book signing thing, but that's not really me to do a whole thing that's just about me. So anyway, so I made it really not about me anymore at all. So this event is to benefit Palm Beach County Victim Services. The idea is that if you would like to donate funds, or if you brought supplies tonight, which some people already did, they're over in the corner. If you'd like to donate funds, you can make out a check to Palm Beach Victims Fund. And also what we have in the very back are some items that have been donated by various people that are either services or art, or some art prints and things like that. So with some suggested donation prices on them. So they don't cost that price, but we're kind of asking if you want to donate for those items, that then that money will also go towards Palm Beach County Victim Services. The book, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, but is my story of sexual trauma, PTSD, and recovery from PTSD. And really, I wrote the book primarily, I've written stories for a long time, but the book was important to me to write because I feel like there's a lot of stigmatization of PTSD in people that have trauma. There's a lot of misunderstanding and stigmas about women who have survived some kind of violence. And there's this pervasive thing that I keep finding, both as a mental health provider who provides trauma therapy and as a survivor, that a lot of people are under the misapprehension that it's something that you can't heal from. And so for me, it was important to tell my story of healing because I wanted to give the understanding that it's possible. And also not just that it's possible to heal, but that you can be a competent human being. That you can be a functional, strong, empowered human being coming out of trauma, and that you don't just have to live and stay in brokenness, that you can mend from that place. And so for me, it's a very important issue to be able to then do something like this where, yes, the book is the premise and maybe the impetus for it, but it's really more about the fact of helping people that are going through this situation now, for people that can understand better what that situation is, and to raise awareness and to raise services, funds, and things that can support the services in the community that we live in for people that are victims of violence. In particular to my background, women who have been victims of violence and who are survivors of that. And one thing I've noticed that the more that I've never been silent about my history, but over time and over my own healing, I've become more vocal and more of an advocate in terms of talking about my experience in so far as it can serve somebody else. And it's just profoundly amazing and at the same time not quite so shocking that every time I talk about it, more and more women come up to me or write me an email or talk to me about their own experiences of violence, whether it was being sexually assaulted, whether it was being in a relationship of domestic violence, emotional abuse, that it's so pervasive. It is so much more pervasive, I think, that even the statistics can show. And I'll mention a few statistics throughout the evening, but one is every 2 minutes a woman is sexually assaulted in the United States. And that to me is just, it's profound, and I can say that from the number of people that talk to me about their own experiences, when I talk about mine, I think it still underrepresents how much it happens and how pervasive it is, and also how silent it is. And that was the other piece about this, was lending voice to something that is violence against women, which so often is an issue of silence and of secrecy and of shame. So to kind of break that silence and to tell the story of being able to mend brokenness. So I wanted to take a moment and have Ronnie Barker, who's from Victim Services, Palm Beach County, who's right down the road at the courthouse, which I didn't realize there was an office for, right in Delray Beach. So I wanted her just to take a moment to explain that if you're donating funds tonight, if you're donating... Thank you very much, Ronnie. And also, the materials and the items of the donations can come in at any time. So even whether or not you're able to do that tonight, they're always something that's useful. And I think especially you know, there's something very personal about those comfort care items that you can, you know, in one of the most horrible experiences, not just a sexual assault, but the process of the forensic analysis collecting is such a difficult and often humiliating experience, necessary, but very difficult. So to be able to give somebody an outfit or protein bar, or a pair of underwear, or a toothbrush, or those things that kind of bring back a little bit of humanity to somebody in those moments of pain are simple and are inexpensive, but just really mean a lot. So just something to consider too, going out into your communities, and for as many people are here tonight, I hope that it becomes an advocate for another 5 or 10 or 15 people in the communities that you live in and that you go home to. So next I'd like to introduce Michelle Rosenthal, author of Before the World Intruded, which is her survivor memoir of trauma, her traumatic experience and recovery from PTSD as well. We met about like four years ago now? Yeah. Anyway, so we had a lot in common, not just the recovery process, but the advocacy and just kind of a lot of passion around this issue. And so she became a dear friend. And she has a wonderful website called healmyptsd.com, which is an amazing resource for anybody that's experienced trauma. It just has so many, from audio, from her radio show to articles. It's just an amazing resource. But she's a wonderful woman, and she was also kind enough to write the foreword for my book. So I introduce you to Michelle, and she's going to talk.
Thank you so much for coming. Is everybody feeling like you're here and it's going to be a meaningful evening?
Yes.
Yes, right? Because all of us here, we don't know each other. Well, some of you know each other, but I don't know many of you. But if you were to look around and imagine how many of us have had some sort of trauma or know someone who's had a trauma, how many things do you think we have in common? A lot. 5 things maybe? 10? Maybe 20? My point is that all of us here don't know each other, and you definitely don't know me, but you know more about me than you think, and here's why. As Teresa explained, when we met because, and I wrote the foreword of her book because we had so much in common. And actually, Teresa, I think we met because I was in Delray sponsoring, I think, a Palm Beach Victim Services event.
It was domestic violence, I think it was ADVA.
Was it ADVA?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it was something related to this. Yeah. All right, so let me tell you why I wrote the foreword and why I adore Teresa. Back in 1981, I was a 13-year-old girl, and a doctor made a very egregious mistake and prescribed a medication for me that I was almost fatally allergic to. Now, had he just taken the time to read my chart, I probably would not have been right here right now. But he didn't, and what happened was I was allergic to this medication. It turned me basically into a full-body 3rd-degree burn patient. By the time I left the hospital, I had lost 100% of my epidermis, but more importantly, I had lost myself. Trauma changes us, whether it's a car accident, abuse, assault, illness, or even just losing your job. Big T or little t trauma changes who you are. If you think back over your life to an event that you feel was enormous and maybe even emotionally overwhelming, if you think back to who you were before that, and then you think of the event and who you became afterward, is there anyone in this room, show of hands, that feels you are exactly the same? Nothing in your life has ever gone wrong, and whatever has, if it has, hasn't touched or changed you at all. Is there anybody who could say that? No, right? Okay, so here we are. By the time I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, it had been 24 years of struggling with how trauma had changed me. And while everybody noticed that I was different, and while I kept telling myself some people are just meant to be crazy, and I'm one of them, so may as well embrace the craziness. By the time I was diagnosed, so much of my life had gone by. And by the time I came out of recovery, and I am now 100% free of the past, 100% free of PTSD symptoms, and I decided, well, what do I do? I was 40 years old. I had no family, no career, no life path, no purpose, and absolutely nothing meaningful that I had been doing because I had just been coping for so long. And I decided, you know, it really would have helped my life if someone had given me the information I needed to move forward, to define what was wrong, to understand I wasn't crazy, I just was struggling with how trauma had changed who I was. And I decided to give back, and I founded HealMyPTSD.com in order to do that. Now here's where Teresa comes in. Because as someone who was working in the industry of healing trauma, I'm a post-trauma coach in addition to a mental health advocate, I had set up a bunch of Google alerts to let me know when people were writing online about trauma and PTSD and recovery. And one day into my Google alert mailbox came a link to a woman who was writing about yoga and trauma and recovery and the culture shock of moving from New Jersey to Florida. And since I had made that move from Manhattan to Florida and come to very sadly understand that Florida's a lot of hype, not a lot of substance. You notice that? You know, my mom and I got in the car and thought, let's go to the Murakami Gardens. And we went, and it was lovely, but there was not a single flower. Where was the garden experience? And we went to a restaurant that had Asian infusion, and it was really just a lot of soy sauce in every dish. And Teresa was writing about that on her website, and I started commenting and saying, it's crazy, I need another Northeasterner, let's get together. And when we got together, we couldn't stop talking about what it meant to be a survivor, about what it means to heal and overcome the past, what it means to decide, this is who you used to be, this is who you are now, and who do you really want to become? And so many of our conversations have focused on that idea of how do we move forward after trauma? What's the positive side? I met a man who was here earlier, and he said to me, I came tonight because I heard you on the radio and you said it's possible to heal PTSD. And nobody has ever told me that before. And I said, well, you've come to the right place because this is going to be a group of people who really understand and get that. And nobody gets that better than Teresa. As a survivor herself and as a professional, I have watched her over the past 4 years that I've known her really go on a journey of evolving herself, taking herself from who she had become and developing a vision for who she wanted to be despite the past and actually because of the past, because of the work that she does. I always am saying on my radio show, in every conversation that I have, we don't heal in isolation. We heal in community. And that is what is so special, I think, about this evening, about what Teresa's doing, about the concept of Mending Broken. In the book, she gives you the unique perspective of both a survivor learning what it means to put trauma in its place, and also a therapist, a professional, explaining what it means to be traumatized and to recover. And I think those two perspectives together are enormously important, deeply meaningful, and so inspiring, because in a world where we hear you can't do it, you are broken, we really need voices like Teresa and her book and events like this saying, yes, you can do it. It is possible. And the more I work in this field, the more I spend time with Teresa, the more I admire your terrific spirit, your ability to pull together events like this that bring us all together, and her ability to, in this book, give you a glimpse of what could be possible for you. You know, on the road to overcoming trauma, sometimes we can have enormous hopelessness, helplessness, despair, a huge feeling of powerlessness that feels insurmountable. And sometimes we have to borrow hope because we don't always have it ourselves. And Teresa and this book, and the reason I was so delighted to be asked to write the foreword is because I think it's a terrific place to borrow hope from. So if you have not read the book, I highly recommend picking up your copy tonight. There's my little shameless plug for you. And if you have read the book, I encourage you to share its message because as a community, we heal our community. And I thank you for being here tonight, and I hope that you enjoy the evening, support Teresa and her book, and all of us who are all survivors in some way, shape, or form, and move forward from tonight asking yourself, who am I going to become now? Who do I choose to be? Despite what I've experienced, despite who I've been, who do I want to become? Have a great evening. Thank you.
So I was so impressed with how Teresa was able to get this book pulled together and published right before the December event of Voices Out of Darkness. And it was a phenomenal thing that it was published in the timing that she worked so hard to get it, and it was successful, and she had it. And at that point, you know, I wanted to write a song about it. And for this particular day, I wanted the words to be from Teresa. So I gave her a jump start and put a template of kind of some ideas of what I was thinking and put it right in the format of how I would sing it. And so it was really cool because I was expecting her just to kind of write like just a stream of consciousness or something, just kind of words. And she put it in the same pattern of how I wrote it, and it was amazing. So I sat with it this week, and I took her words and I put it in, and so it's an amazing kind of thing how this synthesized, and I get to gift this to you. So cool. Innocence is lost and life is stuck on pause. Need a path out of broken and a way out of lost. See, the way to freedom is about letting go. Take my hand and take that first step and let it all go. Mending broken, trying to find a new way. In that quiet moment, the world fades away. When you have no idea what and where to go, mending broken will take you down that winding road. Out of darkness, a new light will shine. Grace will rescue your crookedness to beautiful mind. When you're done with being on the path all alone, a divine hand will be there to heal down to your soul. Mending broken, trying to find a new way. In that quiet moment, the world fades away. When you have no idea which way to go, let divine light come and heal you down to your precious soul. Mending broken, trying to let it all go. Mending broken, trying to let it all go. As you walk down your mended road, may remember the fragileness of my body and soul, but the strength of this authentic, cosmic, eternal you takes you further than what you may go through. Mending broken, trying to find a new way. In that quiet moment, the world fades away. When you have no idea which way to go, mending broken will take you down that healing road. A divine light come and heal you down to to let it all go.
She's amazing. She's amazing. Totally blows me away. And it really explains the experience very well. So I don't need to read anything, because you just heard it. What I am going to read, though, is just a little bit from sort of the beginning, the brokenness part. Then we're going to take some time and kind of mingle and get some food and do all that. And then I'm going to go through a little bit of the other stages as we go through the night. And we're going to hear some other stories and get to give some awards to some amazing women and organizations. So the way that I wrote the book eventually, I did write it actually in 2 weeks, but it was 4 years in 2 weeks. So it took, the way it worked was that I was in PTSD for about 4 years, actively, rampantly, not aware it was happening. And then all of a sudden, I sort of had a series of awakenings and figured out something was going on and figured out it was PTSD. And then it really took another 4 years to figure out how to fix it and how to mend from it. And then I would say when I met Michelle about 4 years ago was when I started writing the book, because I was in a place where I felt like, okay, I'm ready to tell the story. But I clearly did not know how to go about it, because I kept writing like 30 pages and then saying, no, that's all wrong, and erasing it, and then starting over. So that was 4 years of that. And then about 2 weeks before we did the Voices Out of Darkness event that Peyton had mentioned, which was awareness for trauma, addiction, suicide, and mental health in young adults, 20s and 30-somethings. I had sort of a divine impetus that I should write immediately and finish it by the event. And so maybe it was just the deadline, and maybe it was a lot of grace, and probably it was both. But it ended up getting completed, and what it was really a mixture of my understanding as a professional, as somebody who studied extensively trauma, in becoming a trauma therapist, and getting my master's in social work and specializing in trauma, and really working in trauma for about a decade and explaining trauma to people who were also traumatized, but in a way that sounded like English and didn't sound like a bunch of jargon. So it was sort of a composite of that understanding and learning that I'd gotten along the way that had helped me in my healing. And then a composite of short stories, which is sort of the original way that I've written a lot, is sort of creative nonfiction, short stories about experience. So mixed experience and understanding, and hopefully created something that gave light on what trauma looks like. So I'm going to give you a bit of the beginning of that. The introduction, which is called Brokenness and Into Slumber, I began with, when I started my work as a trauma therapist, a longtime professional told me, all we do as trauma therapists is put Band-Aids on open wounds and hope they stay on. We really just try to keep infection out of the wound. It took me a long time, professionally and personally, to believe that more than Band-Aid living was possible. During my own Band-Aid stage, I never thought there was anything on the other side of my semi-infected reality. I assumed the chaos and messiness in my brain was the new homeostasis for my life. After my trauma, I was held together with Scotch tape and Band-Aids. I was living as a soul widow. I was a hollow vessel that moved and acted and functioned like a person, but with nothing functional on the inside. I was a mess of guts and pain and blood, which I tried to hold together with rudimentary tools. The wounds of trauma are invisible. They are a secret no one knows, carried by warriors on the front lines of their mind. The battle wages incessantly and exhaustively. It is impossible to see and difficult to heal. When my clients come into therapy after 1 or 5 or 50 years of living in the Band-Aid stage, I tell them to be easy on themselves. They can't judge their own experience or feel guilty for time lost in a vacuum of crisis stabilization. They survived. I ask that they give themselves credit for their own survival, because to survive is an immense feat. The constant battle is exhausting, and just to get through it, alive is laudable. I remember that internal war. I ask them not to judge how long it took. We must acknowledge the human strength in survival. Stage 1 of trauma and the aftermath is just a matter of surviving, from one day to the next, and 1 week to the next, however possible. A person's focus is on keeping the guts and pain and blood on the inside by whatever means necessary. And then I go into chapter 2 of the storytelling part, which is called the aftermath. Living life in partial slumber is a disorienting experience. Time takes on a different quality, and it's hard to distinguish things like days, seasons, and even what happened when. In the aftermath of my rape, my life became cluttered with internal and external insanity and chaos. The world was unbearably bright and loud and scary. I have tried to do much detective work over the years. Many times I have tried to excavate and unearth the details of the 4 years that followed the night in the grass, but I've never been able to discern many facts. From that time, every moment from that time has been disoriented by the lens of suffering and trauma. There are certain landmarks that are clear. One in particular I couldn't forget as much as I wish I could. It branded me with a mark of trauma deep enough to solidify my fate for the next 4 years of my life. It was the experience of my second rape. After my first assault, I was standing on a cliff of emotional annihilation, almost daring the universe to push me off the edge. All I needed was one good shove to disappear. In the rubble and artifacts of my life stands 2 clear incidents, my first rape and then my second, which I have excavated in full from the archaeology of my soul. They are the only identifiable remains of a personal history lived out of focus, while my brain ensured its own survival and protection through any means necessary. Between the first rape and the second, I was a half person, existing in a half life. After the second assault, the sum of my parts equaled pervasive PTSD. So that's the beginning. It's not an easy one. It's still not even really easy to read. It definitely wasn't easy to write. I've heard from other people who have wrote their story of trauma that it's a very exhaustive experience to go back and write it. And it really was, especially in 2 weeks. It was a lot of emotional baggage to throw out there. But that part is just the beginning. And the reason we're here is because there is hope on the other side of that. So I don't want to leave with a cliffhanger of desperation. But we're going to go into some time now for mingling, eating, drinking, looking at some of the donation items, if there's anything that you would like to get tonight. And the books are over there, and I'll be over there to sign them. And so enjoy for a little bit.